Sarnath Banerjee, who needs no introduction. But Sarnath today will not talk about his own comics, about his own work. Today we will discuss Satyajit Ray's work. But there is a crucial difference in the way we will do Ray, because there has been numerous umpteenth number of sessions on Ray, and we have been discussing the whole thing again and again. It's like ad nauseum, it's like a cycle that never ends. So we wanted to do something completely different, because when we sort of started with Sarnath, and I had this uncanny, sneaky feeling that, a lot of visual idiom that, and especially in his writing, that Sarnath uses, may be influenced by Ray. Yeah, so it would be great if a lot of you can come in the front, because I don't know whether, I think the sun may be a problem. Yeah. Yeah, so there are images here in the session, so I would actually advise you to see all the images, because it's a kind of an image-driven session. So, so we basically, I thought that Sarnath had this very kind of visual storytelling technique, which almost is, it seems to be, seems to resemble Ray in certain way. It's very difficult to pinpoint, right? I mean, it's very difficult to touch a chord that it is this and that. But, there are tangential references here and there. So what happened was, there was a website called darkbangla.com, and Sarnath did a piece there. And Sarnath actually drew pictures there using what he calls a Satyajit Ray filter, right? So we will start the session with that, and maybe ask Sarnath, I mean, when you did that piece, remember? So it would be great if you can show the 3 drawings, illustrations that he did. Can we have the illustrations? Yes. So I think, Sarnath, you can just go on, yeah. So we have the illustration. Yeah.
Can you see?
Can everybody see the illustration?
If anybody can't see the image, we can put the umbrella down.
Yeah, we can take the umbrella down. I mean, if the image, can everybody view the image? Wow, thank you. Yeah, get the umbrella out. Yeah, I think this is much better. So we have this image. So Sarnath, please go through it. I mean, you started this short essay, and what was your motivation? Why did you do it, Yeah. And what is the story behind it?
So Ray has always had a kind of, as you said, like an invisible inspiration on all of us. And one of the things, is there anyone in this audience who doesn't at all understand Bengali? Then I'll keep the whole conversation entirely in English, but I can use a few Bengali words every now and then.
I think you can.
If there's anyone who absolutely doesn't, then I'll keep it. So I guess everybody is all right if I'm a bit bilingual. Okay. So there's something uncanny about his work, which is what I like the most about his work, is this sort of uncanniness. Mane ektu bhuture. There's something that is not exactly Chamili Memshap type bhoot, but something which is slightly awkward, something which is very much built on the realm of natural, but slight.
Yeah, it edges towards that.
Yeah. Like you're heading towards Chandanagar, but the train kind of stops in a station which does not exist, or something like that. Or you thought that you saw a station pass by which you've never seen before.
Right.
Stories begin very much within a normal setup. So when I was asked by Malavika to kind of do a commission work on Ray, I decided that because people have spoken about Ray so much. I mean, it's like
now.
Yeah, and I mean, we all have. You have, I have, and I think that he's potentially boundless. He's boundless. His creative output is boundless, and one can't stop talking about him because, well, like just one aspect of it. The problem with that is that it is spoken about so much that it's hard to kind of find original things to talk about. Sometimes you have to really rack your hand. There's also the danger of Ray becoming like a Lata Mangeshkar kind of a situation, where because of Lata Mangeshkar, there are many singers who did not catch the the Lata Mangeshkar tone, which is that nightingale, which is like this little baby girl tone that decides the North Indian music. I'm not saying Ray had that baby girl tone, but I think that he set the bar so high and differently that it was very hard to talk about other kind of works. You know, like recently you might have heard about this book called Sinama Paradiye, which is Torun Mojumdar's book, which is you, and also Shayandev's book, which is on Uttam Kumar. You realize that Bengal had a very rich film industry.
Right.
Ray is one part of it, and perhaps one of the most important part of it. But there had been all the Tapasinas, Ashit Sens, and the whole Rishikesh Mukherjee lot who all went to Bombay, Bimal Roy, etc., etc. So Ray has this sort of also a danger, and this is also something that I've seen in Bengal among us much more, that we've done that to Tagore and we're doing this to Ray.
Same.
That he's like a
like a pedestal?
Yeah, like a tree that literally stops any kind of undergrowth or any kind of biodiversity to develop. Having said that, I myself extremely strongly impacted by Ray's work, because Ray's work has always been very cosmopolitan. His work has never really been, and it's an Oriental cosmopolitan. He's been influenced by Japanese, not just European and Western, but also Japanese and Bengal school, etc. So all that creates a very rich individual. So when I was asked to write this series, what I thought that I was just racked my head. I just had nothing clever to say about Ray. So what I did was I made 3 drawings. I used the Ray style of drawing. This is what I thought would be a tribute. First I thought I would trace a drawing and I'll leave it at that. And then it's not as if I've got a very fiercely independent style, but it's a handwriting. It's like, when was the last
signature,
time?
Kind of a
yeah,
signature.
when was the last time you actually copied somebody's signature? It's only when you did it for your report cards, right? Because you didn't want anyone near dear to you, family members, to get a heart attack after seeing your report card. So you did a kind of an act of kindness to your relatives by signing your father's signature and
is it the same for you? I mean,
avoiding them to go through the suffering of going through my report cards. And I think in the long term they would be thankful that I did that. But anyway, so doing Ray is a bit like that. It's like it's like signing your report card. I just decided to copy it. But while I was copying, in this typical Ray style, uncanny things started happening. Bhuture, like Oshoriri, or whatever the word. Spectral, otherworldly, which shows that
grotesque, maybe.
Grotesque is a
bit more on the higher side, right?
Yeah, grotesque would be Bengali
macabre
serial. Bengali serial kind of a level of movement from something
uncanny.
Subtle,
let's stay at
uncanny, something much more subtle. So I thought perhaps I'm not a very good reader, but perhaps it might be easier if I read it. Then you'll probably have a better question.
Please.
So I'll just read that bit which went with. This is called Boroda Nondi's Rememory. It's hard to read, but I'll try to read it because of the sun. Boroda Babu felt dizzy as he stood in the middle of the market. It was already a bit odd when Saniji, the owner of Morning Store, looked way younger than his 50. Sorry.
Yeah. Will you?
Sorry. Boroda Babu felt dizzy as he stood in the middle of the market. It was already a bit odd when Saniji, the owner of Morning Store, looked way younger than his 60s. On top, he told Boroda Babu that he has never heard of Meswak, the brand of toothpaste Boroda Babu has been buying from Morning Store for the last 10 years. Overnight, half the products were gone, leaving neat, unfussy shelves. The newsstand owner too looked younger. The dry cleaners, the mother dairy, the electricians, the medical store, all looked clean and non-shabby. Some shops had closed down without leaving a trace, as if they never existed. Everybody looked a few kilos lighter and healthier. Their activities were slow and non-hectic. The air smelled different. Everything was alien yet familiar. Boroda Babu felt anxious and thrilled at the same time. To his surprise, he saw that the front page of all newspapers reported an event that happened 15 years ago. Upon close inspection, Babu found that the dates of the paper have turned 15 years back. Babu isn't going mad. He just isn't up to date with the news. Last night, the government had decided to restore the original name of the city, which they had changed 15 years back. So basically, he just woke up.
Yeah, it's like a winglet, right?
And no, he time traveled back.
Yeah,
so
I
he
can
just
get that.
suddenly felt dizzy. And so, he didn't go back to the future. He just went a few years back. And then, so this was, when I was drawing, it was a nice Art Deco building in a place near where I live in Greater Kailash in Delhi. And I started drawing. And suddenly this appeared. And it was, I suppose, that same bhuture thing that happens, that the uncanny is not very far.
Right.
It's very much built
There.
in your life.
Yeah.
Am I taking too much time?
No,
Okay. Then we can
we
go
will
to
sort
the
of
next
check
one.
it out. Don't worry. So can we see the next slide, please? I mean, because I think it's a nice way to sort of get into what Sarnath thinks about Ray, and it's a very interesting take,
And the style is pen and ink.
which is mostly Ray's main
Yeah.
sort of stylistic devices, right?
Yeah. I don't use pen and ink. I use brush, and so it's a different style for me. And I was trying to do this pen and ink, and it's a very hard style with all this cross hatching. And Pinaki will show you a lot more examples of him, much superior. I think that's why he wanted to show these images before, so that after showing the Ray images, I would not be actually physically would be in a position to show my images. So anyway, I'm going to read this. It's shorter. Out of job voice artist Doyamoy Kanjilal. The names also. I've tried to kind of stick to the names that Ray would use. The sort of name you would find in.
Not exactly the names, but
Not exactly
maybe
Yeah,
kind of
something
visually
like-
map the kind of names.
Yeah,
he
like
may
how
have
many
used.
Kanjilals would you It's
Fine,
not it's
yeah.
it's not a Subroto Chatterjee or a whatever Banerjee. It's a name that is a very Ray kind of a name. Out of and the professions also. This one is a voice artist. The one before didn't have a profession. But anyway, out of job voice artist Doyamoy Kanjilal woke up after his operation feeling woolly and disoriented. As his focus improved, the Doyamoy felt he had the answer to some of the key questions of life. He left the hospital bed and wobbled towards the table where sat the Bahadur transistor, which he carries everywhere he went. Something odd happened. Listening to a current affairs program, he could hear his own voice interjecting the transmission. He soon realized that he has developed a superhuman quality. He can intercept and modify radio waves. So just imagine the power it would give you, whether a radio is going on and there's like government propaganda or corporate propaganda, and you just do a little bit of intervention here and there, and it can just subvert everything. And that's the power. It's almost like a superhuman power. It's the power to have right now. And it is a fantasy also. I wrote
and it's
about
very
it.
close to what Ray does in a lot of his own works, right?
Ray also avoids direct politics.
Yes,
and
but
I also I don't. My work is politics with a short P, because I still work within the realm of imagination, and I increasingly feel that to survive contemporary India, there is what is most urgent need. And I know forests are being, everything is getting copyrighted. Forests are, Amitabh Ghosh was talking about all these huge problems that are happening, and we are constantly hearing about these problems. But for me, I think one of the most important thing that is going to help us to tide through these years, if we ever do, is imagination. Without imagination, we nothing.
Yeah,
we are
sure.
nothing.
I agree.
Imagination is what helps us to
Yeah.
protest. Imagination helps us to kind of, to just, mental health, just to kind of let. And I'm going to show you the last one.
So can we have the third one? And then we will sort of move into Ray's own work
Yeah.
and discuss it. Because
Then
why
I'll-
we are putting this up first, because, it's a kind of a take which I thought was very different, yet, so close to what Ray may have imagined, if he had done this today. Like, so, yeah. So, Sarnath, please.
So as you can see, all of them are somewhat related to things that are happening around us, except just I've created a time-space gap. So even with the radio, even with the picture of the neoliberal market and the shelves getting empty, this one also it refers to a very large statue, which was built.
Very large statue.
Yeah, which had the entire crocodile population of that area had to be transferred, I
Yeah.
think, and all sorts of things happened. Horrible economic environmental consequences. Ostad Rotun's Last Trick is the name of the story. Noted sculptor Ostad Ratan Ostad, died without leaving a biological heir. His assistant for 30 years, Biren Haldar, was deeply disappointed. The Ostad had left nothing for him. Next few weeks, Biren spent his days berating the old man and feeling bad for himself. What a waste of life. 30 years is a long time. A few days later, Biren received a letter from Ratan, who had arranged to send it to him after his death. The letter said that Biren does indeed have an inheritance, and it left instruction on how to get to it. While making his last commission, Ratan had made a secret chamber in the body of the statue. The question is, how the hell would Biren reach the secret chamber? You see the red circle? That's a scale. That's a room. The question is, how the hell would Biren reach the secret chamber? He cursed the old Ostad once again, but at the same time, liked the challenge. So as you can see, these are all beginnings of stories, which I'll not write, but for the commission stuff like I wrote.
So one of the good, why we began with this discussion is about Ray, but we began with Sarnath's work, One of the reason is that, how is it to reimagine Ray in a different space? How other authors sort of reimagine Ray, in today's context, right? Because his stories, some of them at least, most of them probably, sound really alive today. Even it sounds really, really alive. And they're like really goofy stories, right? Oddball characters, about loners, about people who felt left out, marginal. So you have this person who will be like a clerk having a day job and moonlights as a maybe kind of a Superman at night. So what I'm trying to say, Sarnath, so when we read, say, for the Corridor, Bernal and Harappa Files, for example, or maybe if you read All Quiet in Bikaspur, you will see that there is this crackling kind of characters, which seems to be straight out from Ray, the pages of Satyajit Ray. So, before, let us go to one of the, can we just have some of the pictures of Ray now? Because, of course, the drawings are all known and I've collected. Can we have have those visuals of Ray? Can we just play those out? So what we'll do is we will have some visuals, but all drawings by Ray himself, which will play out here. But this is actually, this, right? So this is, So it's one of the inspiration for the pieces that you have written. So can you just take us through it? I mean, the style or the... Oh, me? Yeah. So, So Shibuo Rakhosh. Rakhosher Katha.
Yeah, so Rakhosh has
Rakhosh is of course
the idea that
the monster,
exactly,
for the
that it's a speculative monster, a maths teacher. It's a maths teacher can be a monster. And we all perceive a maths teacher as whenever we think of maths teacher, we think about K.C. Nag.
Right.
As a very stern man in a dhoti and, telling us how to do loshagu and whatever. And he uses that metaphor of like a maths teacher being a monster. And the monster is very much within. You never really are sure whether he's actually a monster or not. And this doubt is what... so I also got inspired. I was actually... I did a work in Japan where there are 8 people sitting around a traditional bath in Japan, each of them in their own thought. And they all come from different background. One is a former actor of an old Japanese theater. One of them is a writer of textbooks. And there's one guy, he's actually a dragon. But he doesn't know it himself. Then he was told that you're a dragon, basically. Inside there's a dragon exists.
Right.
I won't go into the detail of the story. So as I was doing this, going through these images, right. When I was doing it, it was invisible. I didn't think about Ray.
I think it's a childhood memory of maybe
it's an internal memory of what these people have done to us inside. They've deeply entered our worlds,
right?
And kind of bent our imagination. So I studied biochemistry. This is a little anecdote.
Oh,
I studied biochemistry because I read a short story of Ray when I was a kid about a German scientist who made in a test tube, he wanted to recreate the evolutionary process.
Right.
And it's a Shonku story.
Shonku story, yeah.
and he made the primordial broth and created the atmosphere and the environment, and suddenly a creature developed, a kind of a salamander-like creature developed. He also created the whole world, the atmosphere of what the world could have been during his origins. And then slowly this salamander turned into a human being, and the human being was Shonku himself. And it has got Archaeopteryces, Archaeopteri, and all
Every
these
kind of
dinosaurs and all that. All was happening in a test tube, which is like the size of like a regular bucket. I was so inspired, and this evil German
scientist
was a biochemist, and I just thought that the amount of eros he
Right.
could bring into science, which we were in a talk in IIT recently, and I was trying to make a point that scientists, do they still have that same kind of imagination in this
Right.
world of specialization? Ray seemed to have it. He was writing, he was not thinking that he's going to make like one kid like growing up in Calcutta take up his future decisions of his life is going to come from like one drawing is done or
Right.
one short story is written.
Right.
So yeah, so he does affect us in very deep ways.
Yeah, Sarnath, you're right. And there are stories like Mriganko Babur Ghatana where, he's just, kind of reverse evolution, right? So it's like something, again, it's meant for kids, right? I mean, not, at least for young people, right? It's not meant, he actually says that it's not meant for adults. But, he's actually putting in themes which are really, really, alive, and which really feels you that there is something deeper. There is something deeper. People are inquiring what can happen after death. The ambiguity of it all.
I personally feel that's the best part of writing. You're writing children's book for adults.
Yes, yes.
That's what I did. That's what I try to do. Endeavor is that I actually now don't enjoy talking to adults anymore.
Yeah.
And I find like talking to younger people is much more fun because they still live in this realm of imagination and not facts and this, that. And I find it's still imagination 101. They would tell you about algorithms. They'll tell you about whatever things that adult people talk about without actually using those technical words. And this is so refreshing. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel. Just have more imagination. And I think Ray created that. He wrote children's books for adults.
That's
and
wonderful. Yeah.
And my lifelong endeavor is to write children's books for adults.
Yeah. Right. So can we get another, a visual? We can just roll on a bit. So there is also this very interesting, brush with the world of creatures, right?
Oh, yes.
Ray is always has this fascination for this non-human-human interaction, and it comes up. This is Septopashirke. This is, of course, an iconic illustration.
Yeah.
This is, of course,
it's a
very technically proficient work.
Yeah, it's a Venus flytrap.
Yeah.
Who goes insane
and sort of traps.
And starts eating the dog and everything. And my God, what imagination. So he knows about botany. He's a very well-read person, and I think reading is very important. I mean, I find it's easier to talk about reading than actually my own books and writing. And this is Venus flytrap, and his imagination of Venus flytrap, he goes, this one botanist who comes from America goes to somewhere in like Modhum Gram or something like that, which was
an obscure kind of place, right?
It was still quite rural that time. In a farmhouse, he makes a little laboratory. He starts fiddling around with plants, and then he suddenly comes across with this like obscure plant, and then he comes and tells his ex-student, bring a gun with you, and there's a Great Dane dog. It's just, I'm not going to tell the full story.
Because look at Shonku, for example. He's like a globetrotter, but his base is in Giridi. Local, very, very local, but yet kind of.
It's a slap on the neoliberal society. Like it's a slap, but they try to make Ghanada characters wear Bermuda and drive in Porsche car. Totally does not work.
Right.
Like, somebody comes in a Hyundai car inside a Beniapukur lane. Doesn't work. Those things work because when you modernize something, like when you modernize a Premandu Mitra, when you modernize whatever that word, you don't modernize by making people wear contemporary clothes. You modernize because of your techniques.
Right.
The way you're drawing it, the way you are creating, theatrically setting, that is modernization.
Right.
A modern imagination implanted on something that happened before, which is why I'm extremely frustrated with this whole process of adaptation and modernization. They don't look like that. You are going to lose that whole atmosphere of tip tip brishti porche, like, you know, and Beniapukur Lane and this pakora being made. I mean, like, you know, or the food, the non-vegan food that is coming and stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it. Now, another thing, I just want to ask, this is like I mean, Ray himself was talking about, that his stories are about loners, right? And if you look at your own work, like,
Bachelor loners.
yeah, absolutely bachelor loners. So, I mean, there is some similarity there. Your work is also about those loners as well. I mean, so
Yeah.
do you think that sort of subconsciously went, crept in?
I've been accused of not having very strong women characters. Although
Yeah.
my life
No,
is
you have some. but
Few.
yeah. Ray is absolutely accused of being completely wiping away the women
in his
characters.
literature,
in
yeah,
his
he has
literary
been, and I
output.
felt deeply ashamed for not having strong women characters. None of my books, the first 4 books, did not have strong women characters, and the characters that I had who were strong women, there was a lady footballer. There's
Yeah.
a lady footballer in Barnouls who comes. There are some raunchy scenes also. I just realized that my women character is not working. I mean, that was an interesting character because she came from somewhere outside Calcutta in the Shokalwala local train, and then she would kit up and then play football.
Play
And
football,
he had a
right.
lover who would come in a motorcycle, who was a married man, and they would go to a dodgy looking
Hotel,
hotel
yeah.
somewhere in Free School Street possibly, or Bowajar or whatever. And they would have a afternoon on of amorous this thing. Deeply erotic, but then I've had it was okay, but I just cannot seem to write women characters. I'm trying very hard now because my world is essentially women. Most of my friends are women. I am in a very feminine space most of the time. But how it just does not translate.
Why do you think Ray also doesn't have? I mean, Ray, of course,
In his
told them.
movies he did.
Movies, of course, very
Yeah.
strong characters. But in this, of course, it's meant for young minds, but of course, there should have been more girl characters.
It's a handicap.
It's a
There's
handicap.
there's
That's I think.
There's no
we
way
should-
of defending it.
Yeah, there is
It's
no way.
like I can't say that, I can't write women very well. That's why I am in my comfort. Whatever I say, I'm digging myself in a deeper hole. It's just a handicap. I
Okay.
just cannot write. In the next book, hopefully, there'll be stronger characters. But yeah.
So can we have more pictures and can we run it out because there are more pictures? They're all by illustrations by Ray.
We should also
And
be mindful
of the time, yes,
questions.
and the questions. We'll take some questions. Maybe some more. Can we get some more illustrations? We have a bit more. Yeah. So this is of course Khogom, which I think is one of the most scariest stories.
Yeah.
He has written. Really, really brilliant. And look at the way his style. This is Big Bill or Brihat Chonchu. Again, that kind of interaction. Nil Atonko, it's indigo. If you look at his style, you can easily understand that there is something very, very specific. This is, of course, the very famous Bonku Babu Bondhu.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there is a bit of half tone there and some line drawings and here and there. And one of the good things about Ray is that he's very minimalist, which Sarnath himself is also. Very.
I am actually I am a minimalist because of lack of skill.
I mean, don't tell it. But anyway,
Ray is he is musical because he knows, a painting or a drawing can never be completed. It can never be finished. It can never be completed. It just have to be finished.
right.
And finish can happen at any point of time. The ability to stop where comes from maturity. As we get
This is brilliant. This
Yeah.
is actually Barin Bhumika Bam. I think this style is something that, he never did later on. It's a one-off style and very different.
It's a spiritual thing because as you get older, you realize you develop confidence and you can leave things. Some people do it younger also, but Indian English writing also is a maximalist because somewhere there's a colonial mindset that we have to outright the white colonial forces, and that's why the writing is always very intelligent, very well written, etc. Writing as something very simple like aha, ooh, whatever, so that kind
Yeah,
of
stuff.
writing.
Yeah.
It only comes with maturity. It just you have to get to the point where you can understand minimality. Unless you use minimality as a fashion statement.
That's a different.
You go to
thing.
any store now, they all want to make minimal stores without understanding minimality.
Right.
Maximal থেকে minimal পৌঁছতে there is a process.
And Ray, of course, is a
Ray
man. Ray mastered
moved that
it.
process,
Ray
I
mastered
think.
it. He almost went through every kind of
Yeah,
steps.
Kala Bhavan, I think.
Yeah, a bit of Kalabhabon.
Japanese.
And there is so much influence, Ray, it's very difficult to sort of say that Ray has this Kalabhabon education, of course he was into
Japanese,
arts.
I think.
Yeah,
A lot of
Japanese
influence.
work. And a lot of Bohos influence, because he was in advertising as well, and he was being influenced by a lot of international work that was, happening. So he was local and international at the same time.
Yeah.
So maybe have 2-3 more maybe illustrations, and then maybe move on to real questions, because we are more interested in taking questions. Look,
you can also take questions now and then continue.
Yeah. So I'll just tell one small. This is Barin Bhumikar Baram, and you can easily understand about kleptomania, and you can easily understand, the way the hair is done, and so everything is happening in the head. So even the illustration is somehow, really making sense.
You can talk a little bit of the design. He uses paste up design.
Yeah, it's also collage and paste up, and you can easily understand it's something very different. And one of the reasons, I call Ray a hardliner, because he always uses hard lines. I mean, I have no pun intended, but it's like really, really he uses hard lines in order to, show everything. One of the things I think is the requirement of the print, because he was actually trying to do it in a kind of a print which was, he was publishing it in black and white. It was not color. It was only when he actually published in Anandamala, which was color, that he began to use color. In fact, his color works specifically was for Shonku, and there were other stories which are published in Anandamala that, because most of these were first published in Shondesh, which didn't have the budget in order to, really publish colored work. So it was also a kind of a, you can say, the time requirement of the print reality during that time. This is brilliant, actually, right? Really, really brilliant. And look at the way he's psychologically, and one of the things that I really admire about Sarnath, there is this character called, Plumber, Girish, the psychic plumber. I always say that Sarnath has a mental map of the city in his head. I mean, it's a bit like Ray, right? Ray has this mental map, kind of, mental map of these things inside. So let us do one thing. If there are certain questions, we can take some questions, and then what we can do, we can just, discuss a bit and move on.
There's a question from that gentleman with the blue.
So there is one question there first, and then we will move. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a question, Nikhil? No. So can we have a question?
Hello.
Yeah.
I must say that what you're doing, that is fantastic. It is very my type.
Yeah, I agree.
I relate myself with you, what you're doing. Fantastic job. But my question is this, the English text, which I've read right now. The mood of the text is very different than we are accustomed with the international text, So I personally find, when I read Satyajit Ray in Bangla, it is something like Jivanananda Das, okay? The connectivity is developed through the language only. I cannot translate it. Or if I try to imitate these things or write a very complete seminal writing, it'll be quite difficult. Next to impossible, I must say. So, why don't you want to change the language? Try to make it in Bangla. And the gharana you are following, that is laudable, undoubtedly.
That's it.
But I have some issue regarding the language which you have written right now. Thank you very much.
Sarnath, please.
Yeah, it's a very valid question.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a very valid question.
I agree. We were discussing it as well, right?
Yeah. We were primarily discussing it in a... So, Ray, this is illustrations and stories, but I write comics, which means there's a lot of dialogue. So your question becomes even more important, because how to kind of bring in the conversation that is out in the street, unless you're in an atmosphere which is like in Anglo-Indian setup in Bombay or Calcutta, or we are with Parsis, or you're like in Kurg, you can't really use that language. People don't, otherwise everything sounds a bit like Mouthful of Sky. I don't know whether you remember this very obscure television series that used to come, full of very beautiful people, models and all that. And the language was really quite rudimentary and very bad, actually. Why not write it in Bengali? I want to. Someday. I kind of want to maybe write more like a range of I don't want to write fully in Bengali, because my world is not fully Bengali. It'll be a bit disservice. But I want to write, I do want to see a hybrid language that will come out. So like, for example, I grew up in a Calcutta, which is very cosmopolitan. And my father would hang out with like for example, Freddie Surti, who had a who had a seed shop in Circular Road. And he used to he's a Parsi guy, Guju, Bengali, English, all spoken. I'm gutter mouth, spoke like three abuses after every sentences. And I recorded Uncle Surti is no more. And I used it in my book, Barnaul's Wonderscaper. Then there are other people, like Gujaratis, how they speak and all that. So, a cacophony of languages. So in my next book, what I'm doing, as you would ask, is the question. I still can't write in Bengali, but I do. It's my desire to write in Bengali at some point.
But you write Bengali English? I mean, in that sense?
Yeah, I do. I write. Like my son does not speak Bengali. I talk to him entirely in Bengali, but he refuses to because he grows up in a non-English and non-Bengali circumstances. His primary language is German. So since I failed to teach him how to, he's 10-year-old, so there's still time. Failed to teach him how to speak in Bengali, I try to make him speak English with a Bengali accent. Library, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, it's a world of sounds.
I think this is very interesting because very few people know it, but a lot of people now know that Ray actually began his short story career writing in English. In fact, his first two stories, remember, when he was actually a Kalavavan student, and it's there in 3 days as well, is actually in English. And then he consciously when he started Sandesh, it's just Bengali and, he was comfortable in English because we have seen a lot of translations where he's comfortable with the language, but still he thought that these characters and this milieu and this kind of cartography and this psychic cartography, if I'm allowed to call it, it will only work in Bangla.
I think we live in a complex world.
But in a different world as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. But we live in complex world. I'm not a novelist. I'm a writer of comics. Comics is not novels. Graphic novel they call it, but it's nothing to do with novels.
I love this statement.
Yeah. And neither is it cinema. It's a world of its own. As comic practitioners would tell you, it does not adhere to the language of cinema. It does not adhere to language of literature. So the fact that we are in a literary festival, it's an aberration. We write in a very different world. We create a auditory universe that is very sophisticated, more sophisticated than cinema. And I think sometimes novel, people will hit me for saying that. But that requires a new language, and that requires a lot of work.
I sometimes wonder, what if Ray has written a kind of a comics? I mean, it would have been fascinating. I mean, he could have done it easily. I mean, he had all the stuff, his writing skills, his illustrations, everything was there, He just probably was busy making great films. So how much can he do? I mean, he has already done so much. It is difficult. Another question, if there is any other question, interesting ones. Yeah. So can we give the mic there?
Okay, so the thing you were talking about, authors not being able to write proper female characters, like, do you think that's somehow rooted into authors' own gender? Like, I read a lot of Suchita Bhattacharya and Bani Bosu as well, and I feel like the male characters they write are not that strong as their female ones. So,
You go for it.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily true. You have, of course, I think it's not the gender issue. I think it's also a kind of an upbringing and a kind of idea that you have, and it changes, it evolves as it goes, right? So it's not so you have, great male writers creating amazing female, what you call, say, Madame Bovary, one of the greatest, created by Flaubert, right? So it's not like that. I think Ray, one of the things, and this is a kind of a criticism we face as Ray scholars, as Ray admirers, is that he's oblivious to the women characters. In all these stories, you don't find really strong women characters. But if you look at his films, it's not the case. It's completely opposite. But it is only in these. I think one of the things that we also need to know is that Ray was not, he never regarded himself consciously as a very literary kind of a person. He was writing this mainly to fill up the pages of Sandesh, the magazine he was running. And that is how he started writing. He started writing at a very, very kind of a late kind of a career, right? He started much later. Writing was, he just wrote 2 stories and it disappeared. And then he started writing much, much later, right? So I think there was a kind of a compulsion as well. He wanted to sort of pander to a kind of an audience which was middle class, Bengali, and I think middle class Bengali kind of Bhadralok audience is very patriarchal as well. So that's a kind of a critique of also the audience, what they wanted. I personally feel it would have been wonderful if there are strong girl characters in or woman characters in Feluda or even in short stories. That would have made us immune from all these questions at least, but we are ready to face these questions because I think it happens not only in Ray but even in some other authors. You can see this kind of thing that is going on when they are writing specifically for children, right? Okay, any more
If I may
questions?
add one
Yeah,
more
please.
point. But one of the things also is there are many other genders coming out, and comics is very
Open
good
to that.
Yeah, it's a very good medium to kind of incorporate all the other kind of. So it's not only man and woman in. There are. I find that as I write and the world that I live in, I am faced with other kinds of gender representation, and I think that would be my way of kind of getting out of that situation, this sort of genderized world. Having said all that, it is. I'm not talking about Ray. I'm talking about me. I mean, it's something I deeply regret that I can't write, and hopefully over the years, like the language, the gentleman's question about language, I do want to write in Bengali. But we're learning every day. I've only written 5 books.
Who knows? Any other question? Okay, please.
Thank you for your talks and your discussions. I have a very slightly.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, I'll speak up. I have a slightly general kind of question about medium. When Satyajit Ray was writing, there was a very strong ethos of print
Right.
and books
Right.
being published and the public sphere kind of partaking in reading.
Right.
At this point of time, reading books, like physical books, is something which is rare-ish, I would say. There are a lot of other ways
Right.
in which people access not just books, but other kinds of knowledge. And I wanted to ask Sarnath, are there any experiments you're doing with other kinds of medium, etc.? Thanks.
Yeah.
Good question. I think both of us are. We just came back from a conference where a lot of these things were discussed. So it's a very good question. Nikhil, who's sitting in front, is figuring out using coding to create simulate the comics. Does not translate very well in electronic medium. That's what I heard. I don't do electronic medium, so I don't know. So he's creating this whole either the time space and having this sort of spread of narrative. He's working on that. I think Amruta Patil is working on more digital reportage-based kind of comics. I myself am very interested in the idea of radio comics, where the narrative is radio. I call it radio comics only. It's be told like a Kolkata Ko, Shonibarer Barbella, or something like that. But it's got comics in it. I don't know how to kind of put it together. I suppose it's some kind of animation, but not animated. Then the future of comics is in that, which is why the gentleman had left. So I would have also wanted to say that the idea of the auditory range of comics is going to change. I perceive a change coming because it's sort of a very rich universe that we are including in comics, but we are also not the sound universe. And I'm sure in the right hand, with the right kind of, a little bit of money is required. Nobody's putting any money, there's a lot of excitement. I mean, Pinaki will tell you, everybody's talking about graphic novels. Every kid in every university wants to do graphic novel. They're talking about ad nauseum graphic novel. But there's no resources, practically no. There's zero representation in, books are not available in any shops. Publishers don't know doing what. Then what else? There's nothing, there's no
One thing I must
money.
tell you, I must add to this really. Frankly, even with Ray's work, right? We actually have, one of the reasons we titled this is Sketching Ray is not about the sketches of Ray. It's how you are using Ray in a way to sort of take a leap towards that world, right? So it's not about the sketches of Ray. Let us be very careful at that. So a lot of this Ray's, works can be easily converted into a comics, right? So we have Kogum, which is coming out very soon. I think 2 days later. There are more which are coming. But the problem is, whenever you try to do a kind of a faithful rendition of the story, right? That goofiness goes. I mean, I personally feel that oddball, kind of situation that is there in Ray's comic. So it's always better to remap Ray. So even if you want to do it beyond print, I think somehow you have to think of different ways of doing it. You cannot just do Ray, frame by frame. You just break him up, because that's gone. That's a time. I mean, Ray himself wouldn't have approved of it. I mean, personally, he wouldn't have done it. If this is my personal belief, I'm actually working in the Ray archives and I've seen his work, and I think that he was constantly experimenting. He's constantly evolving. So it is. So there is this Chutmargo in Bengali that you cannot touch Ray after a certain moment, but I think that should also go.
I think one of the most interesting and encouraging things coming out is the world of zines.
Zines, yeah.
They don't give a shit about any of this. They have their own world. They're doing like much more than like Instagram and all. Okay, I mean, it does its job and it's sort of circular. But zine people, they go out bodily, sit there, create a community, know each other. Doesn't take any nonsense from people like me, for example, well published. They do their own stuff, and they are. I think that's going to be, if zines are going to like spearhead this sort of thing.
I think that's a. Any other questions? Okay, please.
Is the last question or
Maybe one or
one?
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Debashish Das. I actually don't represent.
Can you be a bit louder, because we cannot hear?
Yeah, I am Dr. Debashish Das.
Okay.
I actually don't represent this literature background. I am from social sciences.
That doesn't matter. I mean, of course.
So-
You're a reader. That's more important.
Yeah, the point is, when you said, Sarnath, that your comics or your works are not, referring to a total political background, or you want to stay away from it. You want to represent a fictional world. But when we look at Ray's work, they sort of challenge the system in every possible era, whenever we see, and it is more relevant that we find even today. So the point is, through your work, even if you create comical characters or fictional characters, so how far can you stay away from challenging the system when you do that? Thank you.
I think this is, how much time do we have?
We can take this, of course.
We can take this, okay. Is there any other last question? Then I'll accordingly make the question longer or shorter, answer longer or shorter.
Yeah, I mean, go for it. Sarnath.
One at like this, then I'll combine the two questions and I'll just
Is
give
there another question?
that gentleman
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Please. In fact, Ray was accused of being a bit less political than his contemporaries. And of course, if you look at Mrinal Sen and all, they were within quote, political. But Ray was accused of being non-political, staying away from it.
That would have been my answer also. But anyway, yeah.
Yes, this is a question for Sarnath. I was just wondering, I mean, you just said a while ago that comics don't fit into the bill of literature. I mean, if I am, so how would you justify that?
Two very good questions.
Very good.
Take
Sarnath.
Question number one is, like he said, he also was accused during his time to not be political in the same way as Ghatak and Mrinal Sen and all the others were, because he was more subliminal and he was more humanistic, or that's a terrible word, but he was more like a storyteller, and it's incidental, the politics. Politics will, Dr. Basu, right? Dr. Das, the politics will come out. You're a political being, it'll come out. You don't have to like sort of be, some people would be activistic about it, have it right up there. I feel comics is a much more sophisticated medium, and you can actually get all your politics out without actually uttering any of those words. In the same way as Bulgakov made some of the most frightfully pertinent
Absolutely.
Comment against the Soviet regime with his like fantasy work, The Master and Margarita. So we can. It just requires a different way of thinking outside this whole like, I think we have to finish, outside this realm of like, because if you know, politics is also about sanguinity. You believe in something, you put it up on post, I believe in that, and we get 600 people of all of us who believe in the same thing. The guy outside is not really included in it. It's basically we're talking to each other. And comics, there is, I'm not claiming it does have it, but there's still a possibility of getting that guy who's sort of fence sitting or not politically very mature to kind of see the fact that these are things, the ridiculousness of a statue like that, and the ridiculousness of having a small building room inside that, and they'll see through it. At least you hope. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Like, you know. The the answer to the gentleman in the blue shirt is that it's not, we don't care whether it is included in literature or not, because literary establishment is a conservative establishment. The way it is practiced also, barring a few festivals here and there, we tried, comic book people tried, and then, you know, one book get like long listed for Booker, you know, and then they were like Ian Jack, although one should not speak badly of deceased people, he did not want comics. He's like, yeah, what is this faltu thing, comics? And I didn't want Granta to ever have a comics. A lot of comic book people try to adhere to the world of literature and realize that there's nothing in it. Meaning, I mean, I read a lot, but it's nothing in it for comics. And it is perhaps a much richer world which exists outside the world of literature and cinema. It doesn't have to adhere to it. It is closer to music. Writing a comics is like composing a song. Because Surtal, and Surtal is not a place in UP, not like Nainital. Surtal as in Sur and Tal, is very important to write a comics. If you write tuneless comics, you might as well not write comics.
I agree.
And I write a lot of tuneless comics.
No, you don't.
So
You make tunes somehow, you know. You somehow make tunes out of dissonant notes. So,
think
you know,
on that
note, we
yeah.
need to sort of complete. But, you know, one of the reasons we did this was, you know, to bring somebody like Sarnath, who is not, you know, whom we don't talk about when we sort of think of Ray, right? So we need to bring in more people who really don't always talk about Ray, to talk about Ray and how they have influenced their life and they're changing it. Because that's what is needed, because you cannot remain fossilized within our own kind of ivory towers of scholarship and say, now this is this and this is that, and this is the parameter where they can go and there they cannot go. So this is the main aim of the session. Even if there is one thought-provoking thing that is said by Sarnath, I think we will take that home. Thank you so much for bearing with us. Thank you so much.